Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Berkshire Pension Fund Committee on the 16th of June 2025. My name is Councillor Simon Bond, and I will be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, and acknowledgement that after the meeting, it will continue to be available in the public domain. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this afternoon. However, if it does, please may I ask that you leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside the library next to the fountain. Firstly, it would be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in this meeting and the role they are undertaking. As I said, I'm Simon Bond, Councillor, and I'm chairing the meeting.
I'm Jo Thistlewood. I'm the Head of Pension Fund.
Good afternoon, Philip Boyton, Deputy Head of Pension Fund.
Martin Griffiths, Pension Administration Manager.
Ian O'Donnell, I'm the Interim Executive Director of Resources and Section 151 Officer for Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead.
Ethan Devitt, Independent Investment Advisor.
Doug Sharp, Independent Investment Advisor.
Joe Peach from LPPI.
Richard Tomlinson, CIO, LPPI.
Chris Rule, Chief Executive, LPPI.
Alan Cross, Chair of the Pension Board.
Stephen Newton, member of the advisory panel and representing Working Borough Council.
Councillor Suzanne Cross, voting member of the committee and Vice Chair of the Pension Fund.
Councillor Julian Teasey, a voting member of the panel.
Councillor Mark Wilson, I'm substituting for Councillor Mark Howard, voting member of the panel.
Mikey Lloyd, Democratic Service Officer and Clerk to the Fund Committee.
And online?
Councillor Asghar Majid, voting member of the panel, Ascot.
Thank you. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I have invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I would also like to remind councillors that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I would ask you please to limit the repetition of points or questions which have already been raised by others. Where possible, please put forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. We will now start on the agenda items. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we received an apology from Councillor Mark Howard and he's being substituted by Councillor Mark Wilson.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Oh, sorry, Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Chair. My declaration of interest is that my wife and daughter are now active members of the scheme. I've taken advice on that and I'm still allowed to sort of make a full participation in the meeting.
Thank you. The minutes of the Part 1 meeting held on Monday the 17th of March, are they acceptable? Thank you. So report from the local pension board. That's Jo Thistlewood.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is the first meeting of the Pension Fund Committee that hasn't been preceded on the same day by a meeting of the local pension board. As part of the review of the governance arrangements of the fund, it's been agreed that we separate the meetings of the pension board and the pension fund committee to meet on different days in between each other so that the pension board has the opportunity to scrutinise and support the creation of policies, etc., for the pension fund committee to adopt subsequently. So going forward, it's the intention to present the minutes of the pension board meeting, which has been held in between the two committees, as a record of discussion and to support any recommendations that come through from the board to this committee. So for this time, to start the new process, you're receiving a copy of the draft minutes from the local pension board meeting on the 17th of March 2025, just so you can note and understand what their discussions were. So this is really for information and to note. And then the second part of this item is also to receive the annual report from the local pension board for the year ended 31st of March 2025. It's a requirement of the pensions regulator and the SIPVA annual report guidance that there is a report from the local pension board to the committee detailing the work that they've undertaken in the last 12 months. The report was presented and agreed at the local pension board on the 17th of March, and the board recommended its adoption to the pension fund committee. So the pension fund committee is asked to approve this report and note its publication on the pension fund's website and its inclusion in the pension fund's annual report and accounts for the year ended March 25.
Any questions or comments? Alan Cross.
Just briefly, obviously, with the different way of working, this will look a bit different. Looking at this today, there's a couple of points I might pick up outside the meeting that people will pick up at the next meeting of the board, but these are obviously what we've published some time ago on the website.
Thank you. Is it acceptable that we note these then? On to statutory policies, which is to receive and approve the governance compliance statement for the year ended March 2025, which is on the recommendation from the board.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an annual statement that is required by LGPS regulations. It's a statement of the pension fund's compliance with the regulatory and legislative requirements in its governance and administration. Again, this report was prepared and reviewed by the pension board at their meeting on the 17th of March, and no comments were made or no changes were noted. There's been no change in the level of compliance statement since the last report was presented. We are fully compliant in all areas of required governance. Just for members to note that this is the last year that this format will be presented in this statement, will be presented in this format as a result of the outcome of the Fit for the Future consultation. There will be a requirement for a different policy to replace this, but members are asked to note this report and approve its publication on the pension fund's website and inclusion in the pension fund's annual report and accounts. Very happy to take any questions.
Anyone? Can we approve it then? And for publication? Thank you. On to item 6, risk management. Which is...
It's me again. Thank you very much. It's me again. So thank you, Chair. This is the quarterly presentation of the pension fund's risk register, updated as at the end of May. Haven't done a full review of the content of the risk register, so there are no new risks and no deleted risks presented at this report. However, we have carried out a full review of the risk scores and the mitigation actions. Members will note that there are two risk scores where we're proposing a reduction in that risk score. The PEN 012, which is the risk of increases in pension contributions following the triennial valuation. I've reduced the risk score on this following work that's being undertaken with the pension fund actuary. We are working to ensure a stabilisation of employer contribution rates to mitigate the budget situation that we're all finding in, but also to ensure a continued affordability for the pension fund. So we're looking in a meeting with the chief finance officers of the 6 unitary authorities that was held in March. The actuaries have indicated that the primary rate of contribution, so the future service accrual, the percentage of payroll for all of the major employers, is likely to remain the same or come down a little bit as a result of changes to CPI and the future rate of accrual for benefits. The secondary rate, which is the past service deficit, which in most instances is calculated as a cash lump sum, is likely to increase slightly. The funding level for the pension fund is likely to remain the same at around 86%. But the recovery period by which time the fund is anticipating to be fully funded is remaining at 2040. So the recovery period is shorter, so the secondary contribution rates are likely to increase. However, on average, across the 6 unitaries, the cash value of total pensions is likely to remain very similar. So hence we've reduced the scoring on the risk of increased contributions. PEN 026, which is the McLeod remedy, we've reduced the risk score, so it's gone from a 44 to a 33, still a red risk, but not as high a red risk as it was previously. You'll get more information on that in the administration update report, which Philip will present later. But the team have done an incredibly good job in getting all the data in, doing all the analysis, and we've identified a very small number of impacted members where additional work is required, but that will be, more information will be provided to you later. In terms of the other highest risks, which are in paragraphs 2.5 and 2.6, the vast majority of those are still around recruitment, retention of officers and board members, and also knowledge and understanding of all parties. The risk scores haven't changed, but the trend direction on most of those has eased. So they are still high risks, but not as increasing high risks as we've previously anticipated. Further work is going to be carried out on the risk register. We'll be looking at the 2 climate-related risks that are included in the register as part of the Responsible Investment Task and Finish Group meeting that's coming up at the end of, in the middle of July. The valuation exercise may amend some of the risks that are included in the liabilities section. The funding strategy statement, risk number 47, will be reviewed as part of the valuation project. So we're likely to be able to eliminate that risk at the end of the valuation at March 26. And the fit for the future consultation risk 48, we'll cover that in a little bit more detail later on in the agenda, but it's likely that that risk will be replaced by separate risks or separate action plans as we move forward with that solution. So members are asked to note the reduction in risk score for 2 risks, note the highest scored risks as set out in the report, and approve the risk register. But I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Put this to the floor. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joe, for the summary. Yeah, I just had a question around 2 of the high risks, PEN 32 and 31, around cybersecurity and data breaches. I guess given all of the recent news and cyber attacks that have happened in, recently of big firms, I'm just wondering, what we're currently doing to mitigate those risks. What are the actions there, and do we need, for example, any additional investment to help those areas? And have we had any recent concerns flagged in those areas as well? So those are my questions on those two. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Those are really good questions. We are in the process of updating the fund's business continuity plan, which also includes its cyber risk assessment and disaster recovery plan. So we are looking at that. I think the anticipation is that's coming to September's meeting. Sorry, I'm just checking with the team, but yes, I think that's coming. We're hoping that that will come through to September's meeting. We are very reliant on the cybersecurity controls of RBWM as the administering authority because we're using their computer networks, etc. So we do some work with the RBWM information security team to ensure that those controls are in place. And we also have heavy reliance on the controls that are in place from Hayward Pension Technology, who are our administration software provider. Part of the review of our business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan will also be looking at cyber controls, cyber security from those, and consideration of whether we develop our fund-specific cyber security policy, which will cover all of those areas. So it is something that is on the work plan. We have been very fortunate that we have not been made aware of any significant cyber breaches. We do get information from our pensions administration software provider if they have any issues with their systems, but we haven't been made aware of any significant issues in that space.
If that's you done, Alan Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Just on behalf of the employer representatives, welcome the news that's appearing from the actuary that we may have fairly stable contributions this time. As many of you will know, I sat on the opposite side of the table. What is now 3 actuarial valuations ago, and at that time, the equivalent meeting to the March meeting, the actuary was telling CFOs bluntly we needed to increase contributions quite sharply, and the hope certainly I had at the time was that wouldn't need to further reductions. And I must admit, on a personal basis, I've been rather disappointed in the last 2 revaluations where there have been some further increases. So that we've now perhaps turned the corner and no longer need further increases is good news.
If that's it, can we note the risk register? Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just one question. In terms of I think the highest assessed risk is Pen 23, which is the inability to recruit and retain experienced staff members for the team. I can see there's a number of mitigations, but the mitigations aren't assessed as having an impact, and therefore the net risk is the same as the gross risk, which is still very high. And I guess I'm just sort of concerned, or just interested in the comment around that. That we're not able to effectively account for any of the mitigations.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Very good point. It is something that is very, very high on our agenda at the moment, and behind the scenes, we are doing a lot of work with internally discussions with the RBWM as administering authority and working with the HR department in RBWM to look at our pay structures and our job descriptions. Unfortunately, because we are employed by RBWM and hosted by RBWM, we are very much subject to RBWM's HR policies, job evaluation process, salary scales, etc., etc. So it's something that we are immensely conscious of, and we've been discussing about doing an external review to see whether there is something we can do about the salaries that we are offered within the boundaries of obviously the job evaluation process and the RBWM salary scales to mitigate that action. But it is something we are immensely conscious of. We've carried out 4 recruitment exercises in the 14 months that I've been here and haven't really been able to attract any experienced administration staff, partly because of access to remote working in other authorities who may be able to offer significantly higher salaries, But we are looking at that, and we have got a piece of work that is being undertaken at the moment to look at retaining existing staff and look at how we can promote our recruitment activity.
Can I just add, have I correctly seen that you've recruited some trainees or apprentices, and are they all doing well?
Yes, over the last 14 months, we have 8 trainees, some of whom have been in post for just over 14 months now, some of whom have been in post for just over 2 months now, but they are progressing through the development programme and are doing very, very well. They're really picking up the programme. The difficulty with having trainees as appointed is that it takes away from the qualified staff or the experienced staff are having to train the trainees, and so they are losing their ability to actually perform their own tasks. So our KPIs are remaining very good, but not as good as we'd perhaps be able to do if we were able to recruit newly experienced staff. So that's something that we're working on.
Thank you. Can we note this then? Thank you. So item 7, good governance.
And again, this is me. So a couple of papers, a couple of verbal updates. So the first verbal update was an update on the completion of the 23-24 external audit for the pension fund. I'm sorry to say that there is no update that I'm able to provide you. The external audit for RBWM is still subject to the review of the objections that were received to that account. Further information will be provided obviously at the Audit and Governance Committee meeting on Monday the 23rd, but until the RBWM accounts are concluded, the pension funds accounts for that year can't be concluded as part of the audit regime. So really for members just to note that we are still waiting for that to be finalised. But in the interest of moving forward, we're now looking at the draft financial statements for the pension fund for the year ended the 31st of March 25, and the external audit plan for the same year from Grant Thornton. So those two areas can kind of be taken together, but are separate. The draft financial statements are not required for publication separately, and they won't be audited, well, they will be audited separately, but there won't be a separate audit report on them. They form part of the RBWM accounts as the administering authority. The accounts that are presented in the pack at page 59 onwards are the financial statements as they stand at the moment. There is still some information missing as part of the standard year-end close down timetable. Information on investment management fees are still being collated by LPPI, and we're expecting that towards the end of August. Information from the fund's actuary, Barnett Waddingham, on the longevity valuation and the funding position is expected to be received in the middle of August as part of the timetable. However, there is a requirement for RBWM as the administering authority to present their draft accounts for public inspection over a period that must in June. So the RBWM accounts and the draft pension fund accounts will be presented to the Audit and Governance Committee on the 23rd of June for approval for publication and delegation for the Director of Finance to sign for those. So as I said, there's no statutory requirement for these accounts to be presented to the Pension Fund Committee as they're not separately published, but it's good practice for the committee to see the financial information of the pension fund and to note the presentation of those accounts. So I'm happy to take any questions on those draft accounts, noting that there is still some information to be updated and that they are still very much subject to external audit.
Councillor Cross.
Oh, sorry, both pressed our buttons at the same time. Yeah, Jo, are you going to answer any questions on the Grant Thornton presentation in the pack? It's just the first part. Sorry.
Just
okay,
the accounts at the moment, sorry. But then we can move on to the audit report.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tizzy?
Yes, so just the first question is about the actuaries, the Barnett-Waddington, the Barnett-Waddington report. Do we think that that is likely to delay anything, or are we happy that it is as scheduled and as normal?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Tizzy. Yes, the timing of the information from Barnett-Waddingham is very much dependent on us providing them with information as part of our year-end process to get them to be able to update their final information for our year-end process. So we've provided them with as much of the data as we can, and we're on target to give them the final data by the end of this month. They will then carry out their calculations, and hence the timetable for this information to be received back from them is the middle of August, as has been agreed. But however, because of the deadline to publish the RBWM accounts in draft for public consultation, we have to provide a set of draft accounts with some information missing, but it's very clear in those accounts that the information is missing, and it's part of our scheduled year-end timetable.
Okay. In terms of the external auditors, again, for 24/5, for the pension scheme, one of the things that we discussed at the last Audit and Governance Committee meeting was that we need to get to a point where we have a sort of an agreed schedule that they will do. We will do this at this time, they will do this at that time. How has that come along for the pension scheme? Are we on the same page as the auditors? Have we agreed broadly, look, we expect this then, you'll audit then? Or are we have we not yet done that?
So thank you, Councillor Tizzy, and that kind of links into the audit plan that we're just about to come to, which I'm happy to go to, but I notice that Councillor Newton has a question, but I will come back to you straight away on that one once we get on to the next item.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm in the right section, hopefully I am. Page 82, if I can refer you to that, please. And about in point 19, it's to do with the scheme valuation. And I know that we do this every few years or so. And we had a valuation previously at 78% and so on. We're now at 86%. Do we now know where we are now at all in terms of, because I thought we were having a valuation at this time, weren't we?
Yes, the triennial valuation is as at the 31st of March 2025, but the results of that valuation will not be finalised until March 26. So we're in the process of completing that valuation, but the results of that will be reflected in the 25-26 accounts rather than the 24-25 accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Would you like to go on to the next item?
Could I move the recommendation on the accounts? Sorry, my glasses I've got the wrong glasses on. That the Pension Fund Committee notes the draft account financial statements for the year ended 31st of March. And then if we move on to the external audit plan, sorry, which is at page 85 of the accounts. Again, in the same way as there's no statutory obligation for the Pension Fund Committee to see the accounts, there is no statutory obligation for the Pension Fund Committee to see the audit plan for the pension fund accounts, it being approved and adopted by the Audit Committee at their meeting on the 23rd of June. However, again, to bring you up to speed with what's happening in the proposed timetable and to link into Councillor Tizzy's question, This is providing you with that information. There are no significant new key risks. The key risks that the auditors identify are standard for most LGPS audits, with the exception, obviously, of our fairly unique longevity insurance contract, which presents high risk in their audit work. So the audit plan is agreed. I've agreed it, and it's being shared with the Audit Committee next week for their full adoption. In terms of the timetable, we worked with, internal finance team worked with Grant Thornton in agreeing the audit timetable so that we'd have a proper plan for when information would be received from external third parties to include in the accounts. We're anticipating receiving information that's outstanding at the moment, that we would have a final draft of our financial statements to the auditors at the end of August. And the early indication from Grant Thornton is that fieldwork for our pension fund audit will start on the 1st of October. So it's significantly within line with that timetable. And again, the fieldwork will run from 1st of October to December, with the intention that the audit is concluded in line with the backstop date for 25-26 accounts, which is the end of January, I think, 26. However, again, always as subject to the conclusion of the RBWM audit, which will be covered in more detail at the Audit and Governance Committee. So the timetable has been agreed, Councillor Toosey, to give you assurance that we've worked with the auditors and everything is on track from the pension fund's perspective. But I'm happy to take any further questions on the audit plan.
Councillor Cross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks for that, Joe. So looking at the Grant Thornton pack, I'm on page 5. And I don't know, Philip, if this is something you're going to cover off later about the McLeod remedy. It was a question there about how confident we are that all the data issues will be resolved by August 2025. That's flagged there. And then also if there's any contingency, if there's any delay with Haywood Pension Technologies, the partner that we're working with regard to the pension dashboard as well. So those are my 2 questions on that page.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cross. Those are very good questions. I think most of those are covered in your administration report. So if you're happy to wait to the next item, substantive item on the agenda, Philip will be able to give you an update on that.
That's fine.
But we're in we believe we're in a very good position for both of those projects.
Alan Cross.
One observation and one brief clarification. The clarification on page 98 of the agenda, there's the observation on page 98 of the agenda, the materiality level has doubled from 30 to 60 million. I'm conscious GT have only been the auditor here a year, since their first or second year, and I presume they're getting a bit more confident in what's going on here. The question arises a couple of pages later when there's a comment about valuation of level 3 investments. I presume from context it was private equity, but it wasn't abundantly clear to me.
Thank you, Alan. Yes. So materiality has doubled, which means basically the sample sizes will halve. So the first year, 23-24 was the first year. 23-24, yes, 23-24 was the first year that was audited by Grant Thornton, and there was no concluded audit for 22-23. So effectively, they had to do a very high level of audit work last year to gain their own assurance that the controls were in place. This year, they can rely on their own audit work from last year, so they've increased their materiality because they can put greater reliance on the controls that are in place as they audited them last year. And then in terms of level 3 investments, that is explained in the accounts, but level 3 investments are those which are not, the value of those can't be ascertained through publicly available documents and are also subject to some level of estimation. So private equity, a lot of the private markets where there isn't a listed price for them and they're subject to valuation estimations and judgments.
Councillor Cross, are you coming back with a quick one?
No, I've got some more questions, if that's okay. Sorry, I've got another 2. Do you want me to give both of those together or separately? Okay, thanks. Yeah, so going back to page 6 on the valuation, I did note that there's an amber flag on cost efficiency. So my question was, how's that planning to be addressed before the 2025 valuation? And what's the plan, looking at that page as well, to improve the funding levels to reach full funding in under 10 years? So I just wondered if you could answer those two. And then my final question was from page 10 of the pack, which was the significant risks. And my question was, how often is the longevity insurance contract revalued, and who does that?
Having a warm moment.
It is
So the GAD report, the Government Actuaries Report, the amber flags that you're raising. So the Government Actuaries Report is something that's carried out after each formal triennial valuation to check the consistency of the valuations that are being applied across all LGPS funds by the varying firms of actuaries. So the report, GAD's Section 13 report, was in relation to the 2022 valuation, and it's the tests that they carry out are there's four tests that they carry out, and forgive me, I've forgotten all of them, but one of them is consistency, so that assumptions are being made and that the valuation is being carried out efficiency. We've had in the 2019 valuation, I think Berkshire's valuation had four or five amber flags, and in the 22 valuation report we only had the one amber flag. So it's an improvement in the consistency and the effectiveness of our valuation, and a consistency of our valuation assumptions and results around along with the other funds. There's never a correct way to do one of these valuations. It is very, very subjective, and Government Actuaries Department have a number of sort of criteria that they think, and bands where they think you should be sitting within. Obviously, each fund is different. Our funding level is much lower than other LGPS funds, so we're an outlier, so we don't necessarily fit. So we're going to have more chances of amber flags. But we are improving our controls and our consistency, and our fitting in to the bands is improving. And we're looking for greater consistency in our funding targets and our contribution rates, as we've explained previously. So we may still have a couple of amber flags, or we may be close to an amber flag for the 25 valuation. Right. But the fact that we've got fewer amber flags than we had before is a measure of our improvement. And to an extent, GAD makes an assumption that all funds should be aiming to be fully funded within 10 years. For the 22 valuation, our funding target was 13 years because it had been 16 years the year before. So we were moving it closer, but we hadn't reached their perceived ideal funding level, funding achievement plan. So we weren't, there was no red flags. Amber flags are highlighting that we're slightly out of line, but we had a meeting, myself, the actuaries and representatives from GAD, to discuss it, and they were comfortable that our explanations of those yellow flags or amber flags were acceptable. And then moving on to the valuation of the longevity contract, the longevity valuation is carried out by the fund actuary, based on data that we provide to them, and linking into the information that's provided by the insurance provider of that contract. So it's done on an annual basis, and reconciled, and forms part of our asset valuation.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Councillor Tizzy.
Thank you. Actually, part of the questions already be answered, so I'll just do the bit that hasn't been answered in the interest of time. So on page 14 of the short pack, which is on of the main pack, so to do with key risks, page 102 of the main pack. So let's just combine those questions. So the level 3 investments and the longevity contract, in terms of the timing of getting everything are we relatively, as far as we can be, relatively confident that actually everything, will be, or do we foresee any problems there in terms of that?
The level 3 investments, so the private markets, are historically on at least a 1 or maybe 2 quarter lag in terms of the reporting that comes through. And that's industry standards. So we're aware of what those timings are, and we're working with LPPI colleagues to get that information. Where we can't have exactly the 31st of March 25 valuation reports, we are entitled, provided we make proper statements in the accounts, to use the December figures to an extent, with a assumption of roll forward, provided as long as we provide the auditors with a reasonable explanation of how we've rolled that figure forward. So even if we haven't got all of them, we are able to use some form of estimation, provided we put a note into the accounts to say this is how we have estimated them. But as I say, the audit work is starting in October. We anticipate receiving most of those valuations sort of August, September. So we should be in a very comfortable position to get all the information provided to the auditors in line with their fieldwork timeline.
Okay, no, that's very good. I didn't. That's new to me. Sorry, I didn't realise that we were allowed to do that. But that's really good. I mean, looking at the timetable, it looks reasonable. The previous year's accounts, is that going to be a problem in any way? The fact that we still have these objections outstanding, or is that almost compartmentalised and over there while we just get on with the 24/5 accounts?
Yeah, thank you. The pension funds 23/24 audit has been concluded.
Yeah.
But we can't finalise that audit until the council's audit is concluded. But in terms of rolling forward, the current auditors audited the balance sheet as at the 31st of March 24, and we're happy with the figures that were in there. Obviously, they had some issues with the brought forward balances. For 24/25, the starting position was audited by Grant Thornton. The closing position is being audited by Grant Thornton, so we should be in a better position. Obviously, the delay in the conclusion of the 23/24 audit is unfortunate, but it shouldn't impact on the work that's being undertaken to carry out the 24/25 audit, and depending on whether there are any objections further to the 24/25 accounts for RBWM. Who knows when the audit will be concluded.
Okay, fine. Okay, that's fine. And I think the other question's been answered, so that's it.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at page 116 of the main pack, the audit fee estimates. I always kind of look at this when we're talking about pension fund audits, because in my mind and from a layman's perspective, you have one set of professional financial people auditing another set of professional financial people's work, and it always grates a little bit that we pay, one set of professional financial people a large sum of money, 120,000, to look at another set's work. And that's from an ex-auditor. So I just wonder if, I guess there's a couple of points. You mentioned subjectivity in valuations, and I guess the question is there, how can the auditors, really form a view on that? They can, in terms of something that's worth paying for, I guess, how do they actually audit that? And then I'm also looking at the scale fee, where we're going up from 88,000 to 109,000. And although it says they're set by the national procurement exercise, that's pretty much a 24% increase, which is quite a steep increase. And I wonder how they justify that. Just looking at that 120,000, thinking about the value for money, and especially in the context of the RBWM's position, and then probably the other Berkshire councils as well.
With the greatest respect, Councillor Wilson, I'm not an external auditor, so I'm not entirely sure that I can answer the questions as to how that audit work is completed. All I can say is there are a series of tests that they do. We provide information to the auditors which we received from LPPI in terms of their valuation and their data, and it's a reasonableness test, I suspect. And then in terms of the scale fee, there has been a substantial increase, but that was what was agreed by the PSAA. So I'm not really in a position to argue, unless Ian, do you have anything to say on that one?
Thank you. Yeah, Ian O'Donnell, I'm the Interim Executive Director of Resources and Section 151 Officer at Berkshire Maidenhead. So we have been talking to the auditors about the pension fund audit, and I suppose the first thing to say is the scale fee is not set by the auditors themselves, but it's set by the PSAA. And in doing so, what the PSAA does is takes into consideration representations that are made by auditors up and down the country about the costs that they're incurring in terms of carrying out the audits. Very often that is influenced by changes to accounting standards where they have to carry out additional tests or have to build into their costs the work that they need to do in preparing to audit against new standards. So the PSAA sets the fee. We don't have any control over that as an organisation, other than being able to make our own representations to the PSAA about audit fees. You'll be aware, I think, that there has been a general issue with local government audit, which to some degree is being blamed by the auditors on relatively low fees across the sector caused by the regulation that's been done by PSAA, but also by shortages of appropriately qualified staff and increased difficulties caused by changes to the accounting regime. So the consequence of all of that is that audit fees have gone up across the board. And what we have experienced in the past is a situation in which auditors have found ways of increasing their fees by undertaking testing that wasn't part of the scale fee. And in particular, they tend to focus on things that involve judgment. So in our case, it is about the value of investments and the work of the actuaries where they've raised their challenges. So they do have a professional team which looks at these things, and they have a level of expertise. But they have been saying to us recently that their expectation is that we would, in fact, have our own validation of the actuaries' assumptions, which means yet another third-party opinion upon this, where we already have two professional teams looking at it in some depth. So the situation is not entirely clear in terms of what they mean by that and what kind of third-party validation we would be looking for. So we're continuing that conversation.
With me.
All right, so, thank you both for that, and I appreciate that Grant Thornton aren't in the room, so we can't ask them directly. I think if they were, I would do. And also just to note, the column for the audit fee for 23-24 doesn't actually add up. The individual items come to 121,000 as opposed to a total of 140. So maybe I can, via whoever's appropriate, just have a quick dialogue with Grant Thornton about that movement in the fee and what last year and this year actually were. Thank you.
Alan Cross.
Thanks, Chair. Just on this issue, a few years back, there was quite a sharp fall in audit fees, and I think that sort of led to some of the issues that we've seen in the sector, and certainly I sat in a SITFA conference 2 or 3 years ago where there's, are we paying enough for audit fees, and we're getting a, not very good audit because we're not paying high enough fees. And I think some of what we're seeing now is some redress of that, and unfortunately, and that's sort of one of the issues. I originally press the button to just respond or add to the comment on Councillor Cross's query about when we might get down to 10 years. Obviously, we started this journey somewhat over a decade ago with a 30-year recovery period. I think the actuarial evaluation 3 years ago, we reduced by 4 years rather than 3 years the number. So we're down to one fewer. But I think my sort of view is probably not for an actuarial cycle or so, unless we get stonking investment performance.
Thank you. Are we happy to note this?
Yes, sorry, just on the audit fees, I wonder if it might be worth noting, because Grant Thornton aren't in the room, that maybe it would be worth them just asking the question to just explain broadly what the broad reasons for their proposed fees are. I hadn't even spotted that that the previous year didn't actually even add up. I mean, given that this isn't their first year, given that there don't seem to be any key accounting changes that particularly affect, they say IFRS 16, I see later on, doesn't really, they're not expecting it to have a bigger impact on the pension scheme. And also given that materiality has gone up, which means that in theory, where they're ticking and bashing and sampling things, they need to do less. It would be worth actually understanding, well, why is it, given all of those things and that there's nothing particularly new, why is their fee going up by so much?
Councillor Teasey, those are very, very good questions. This report will be presented formally also at the Audit and Governance Committee meeting on the 23rd of June. Perhaps write those questions. With respect, sir.
Good. So I think we're agreeable to note this report. Thank you. On to knowledge and understanding.
Thank you very much. Very quick update on this one. Members will be aware that I circulated a knowledge and understanding assessment to all committee members, including substitutes, all panel members and board members and fund officers. That was circulated on the 3rd of June, requesting completion by the 17th of June, which I believe is tomorrow. 24 people were invited to respond. As of this morning at lunchtime today, I'd had 14 responses. Can I just say, well done, committee members. All 5 committee members have completed the assessment. One substitute member, thank you very much, has completed the assessment. One panel member, thank you very much, has completed the assessment. And 4 of the 6, and I'm not going to say thank you to Alan because Alan isn't one of them, board members have completed the assessment. So I will issue a reminder to those of who haven't completed it on Wednesday this week, just to reassure members that this isn't a test, this isn't a criticism. You will not be held to account for your results. The results will be presented in a summarised and anonymised form and be used to identify areas of where potential training and development may be most beneficial, shall we say, on a collective basis. It's part of the response to the Fit for the Future consultation, which we'll come on to shortly, that there is a requirement for a training and development strategy that asks how the levels of knowledge and understanding are assessed and how it is monitored that the training and development strategy is being effective. So this is a baseline. We will complete we can get the assessment, we can identify where the development will be most appropriate, and then we can measure in 12, 18 months time to see whether that development has been effective. So really, thank you very much to those that have participated. Please, could you encourage your fellow substitutes, panel members and board members to undertake the assessment, and we'll report back. The intention is to report back at the July pension board for board members and for at the September pension fund committee for committee, panel and substitute members. Thank you.
Alan Cross.
Thanks for the reminder. I did know I hadn't done this yet, and I will be attending to it shortly. I have had significant meetings of this and a couple of other things I'm involved in to prepare for recently.
And just to add, I think you said that all the panel members have done it.
No, one panel member has done it.
Oh, sorry, all the committee members.
All the committee members have done it, yes.
All right. In that case, thanks to those in the room and online.
Yes, indeed.
Anything else, or are we happy just with that verbal report? So on to Fit for the Future.
Thank you very much. This is the last one of me for a little while, so you'll be pleased to know. So the Fit for the Future consultation, which was closed in January, the response was published by government on the 29th of May, and the starting point for bringing this into legislation is through the Pension Schemes Bill, which is currently going through the parliamentary process. So the three key areas of the consultation. I'll touch briefly on the pooling proposals, but may call on Chris to provide a little bit more of an update on that. All the pooling proposals that were in the consultation are being implemented. So setting the strategic for the fund to set the strategic asset allocation in line with the template that was provided, taking its principal advice from the pool company, LPPI, and delegating implementation of the investment strategy to the pool, and transferring all assets to pool management, we've already done. So thank you very much to Chris and the team for supporting us through that. Chris, do you want to give a quick update on where you are in terms of the other pooling proposals and working with the other pools?
Yeah, very happy to. Thank you. I think we've got a bit of an update on this in part two as well, so happy to carry on questions there. I think Joe's done a decent job of summarising where we've got to. There weren't really any surprises in the pensions bill or the more detailed response to the consultation. Government's been pretty clear that in its model, it's been quite consistent in the model it wants people to adopt now really since last autumn. And ministers have reiterated the timetable are not moving. So you'll be aware perhaps that there are currently 8 investment pools across the LGPS. Ministers have been clear they expect that to be reduced to 6, and they want that done by April next year. So a number of administering authorities have received letters from the ministers asking them to evaluate their options and come to a conclusion by September of this year in terms of which pool they would wish to join. And how they can do that from a partnership point of view. So, and we're actively engaged in trying to support a number of partner funds or prospective partner funds and how they may work alongside yourselves and the other partner funds we already have within our partnership. There's a lot of work to be done over the summer. We've done various meetings and questionnaire responses. And as I said, it'll come to a peak of effort probably in September where people are looking to make decisions. And then there'll be a period between September and April next year as those kind of at least decisions in principle are turned into kind of firm commitments and people onboarding over that period such that they are compliant with the government's direction for April next year. One of the things you may have read about in the press, which has been reasonably high profile, is that government are taking so-called backstop powers. Those powers will come into effect once the pensions bill has passed through Parliament, but effectively will give the government power to direct funds on what they should do. So either to merge funds into other funds or to direct funds to join a certain pool. Those powers are expected to be reasonably blunt and direct. You may have read about other parts of the pensions bill where government's putting backstop powers in to direct pension funds on where to invest. Those are more relevant to the DC world. The backstop powers they're seeking to take for LTPS are about directing funds on effectively how they should be pooling and what their governance arrangements should be.
Thanks, Chris. That's really helpful. So that's the pooling aspect of it to an extent. The other two aspects were local investments. So government are looking to implement the requirement for LGPS funds to have a target, an approach to set out, in their investment strategy statement, what their approach is to local investment and what their target allocation is likely to be. Working with strategic authorities where relevant to identify investable opportunities, but also working with the pool to ensure that those that the pool has due diligence capabilities and carries out that due diligence on our part. Future annual reports will also need to include the extent and impact of local investment on our portfolio. So we are waiting. We've got some ideas as to how we carry forward local investment, but we're waiting to take the next steps in that more formally, looking at working with the Berkshire Prosperity Board and introducing LPPI and the Berkshire Prosperity Board together to carry out and identify investable opportunities. And then lastly, in terms of local government, the vast majority of the proposals under local governance are going to be implemented as consulted, which links into the knowledge and understanding, as we mentioned earlier, about having a assessment, the requirement for existing regulatory requirements for learning and development for local pension boards to be replicated for pension fund committee members. That there's a policy that says how we've assessed, how we continue to assess, and how we assess the effectiveness of the training that we're delivering. And they're changing the requirement from the consultation for a independent governance review every 2 years is now going to be every 3 years, and must be independent. So we can't use our independent advisors to assess our independent governance review. They have to be independent of our independent advisors. But also that independent advisors don't have to be voting members of the committee. So that was one of the options that was on the table, but that's not going to happen. So we now have a clear direction of what the government's response is. It's being outlined in the pensions bill, which has been publicised. So we will work to ensure that we are fully compliant with those requirements as they come into, before they come into law, so that we're at least heading in the right direction. That's the end of that.
Councillor.
Thank you for those updates. I mean, I've got a couple of questions about the fit for the future, really. I mean, it's interesting that sort of independence governance review, which we were talking a bit earlier about, sort of professional people looking at, reviewing other professional people, and it did seem to be one of those obvious arguments, and the waste of essentially the pensioners or the pension fund members' money. It's good news that I think that it's moving from sort of 2 years to every 3, but it's not much. It's not much of a change, really. This question possibly for you, Chris, actually, but what's your sort of overall view of the government's ambition here? Because I'm still not quite sure I've sort of worked out, okay, they want pooling and they want to reduce the number of pools. It's almost slightly worrying. The backstop powers is the thing that worries me slightly. It does seem that there does seem to be a bit of, we're going to do it for you going on there, but do you get that impression from the government? And I'll add my other question in just now. In terms of the moving to the pools, I mean, obviously April 26 is a key date, but what's your impression at the moment in terms of impact on LPPI? Is it still going to be around? What's the timing in terms of when will we know more about what's happening?
Just to clarify, was that you to ask when will we know if we'll still be around? Was that not? Well, yeah. So just to clarify, so So the government's been quite specific. Yeah, but they've been specific on which pools they wish to reduce. So LPPI received a letter from ministers at the beginning of April, which confirmed that we're already fully compliant with all of the minimum standards. And they welcomed seeing us continue to operate and supporting the rest of the sector as would be possible. So there's no threat to LPPI not being around in April. The question is, across the two pools where letters were received that said that their plans were not kind of sufficient from the minister's point of view, there are 21 funds. And so those 21 funds are in the process of doing due diligence and engagement with a number of other pools, one of which is ourselves. I'm sure they're speaking to at least a couple of others and deciding where they would wish to move to. So the implication for you is that you would hopefully be welcome new partners into the partnership is the main implication. When there's a little bit of a chicken and egg here, in that clearly I would like to be able to communicate to Jo and to her opposite number at LPFA and to Lancashire, where people are moving to, so that they can come back and update you. But of course, until they've been to their committees, they don't know where they're going. And so Jo's been supporting us in this process alongside her kind of colleagues at LPFA and Lancashire. So this is much about you meeting the other partner funds and about them meeting us in LPPI, because it's very much, we're here to serve you as the partner funds, and it's the group of funds working together that's just as important as how you work with us as the pool. So Jo's very much involved in those conversations.
Okay, so it looks like, other things being equal, it looks like because we are compliant and there's a couple of funds that are not, it looks like at the moment, it looks like we are going to be one of those 6 pools, as it were, and we may have some other partners who might want to join the pool, as it were, some other partner authorities. Okay, fine. Okay, in terms of your overall view, I mean, there's obviously that local investment, that was still, what do we mean by local investment? Has that been clarified yet in terms of, because I know that we've got some investments that are local. I'm not sure they're all pooled actually, but is there more clarity over that now? Do you get the impression that the government sort of knows what it's doing, has sort of ironed out some of those things that they're not quite, that were previously unclear, or are we still quite unclear?
Yeah, I think that the consultation response is quite detailed, and so that's very helpful in that it gives quite a clear steer on a number of areas. This question of local investment, as Jo I think mentioned in her introductory remarks, that the obligation remains for each administering authority to define what it means by local and to set a target. So government haven't specified it must mean this, nor have they said this is what your target must be. But I think it's fair to say that were an administrative authority to say, well, we think local means this and our target is 0, that would kind of mean that they have kind of more scrutiny. So they haven't set a minimum target or a maximum. I think there's an expectation, and this is more my hypothesis rather than anyone said this, speaking to lots of different people, that people's targets are going to be somewhere between the kind of 1% and 10%, depending on which fund you are. That's the order of magnitude, maybe 5 is typical in the middle there. What government have said is that they believe that local investment should be more local than the UK as a whole. Now, they haven't said you can't invest in the UK as a whole. They're not saying that's a bad thing, but what they are saying is that they would like to see administrative authorities and pools working with whatever the highest level of local government is in the region. Obviously, with local government reorganisation, that's changing a bit, but let's call it combined mayoral authorities, for example, or unitaries, to try and help shepherd everyone's efforts in a similar direction. So, for example, where there's local growth plans, trying to align the pension fund's activities with the local authorities' activities, with other kind of development kind of bodies locally. So there's still a bit of clarity to come. There are regulations that will be laid. So the pensions bill provides some, if like, overview and over a kind of general kind of rules, but it then does say it will refer to regulation, and that regulation will come not until after the autumn. I don't think we won't have that regulation before September. Let's put it that way. But I think the consultation response is so detailed that we're pretty sure what the regulation is going to say, even though we haven't seen the regs themselves. So I think it's reasonably clear, but it does put the burden back onto you to a certain degree to agree what you mean by local. I think what you already do in local will count well towards that, and they're not being prescriptive around the implementation route. So, for example, 1957 portfolio is a segregated mandate that we run for you. That will be fine. It doesn't have to be in a commingled vehicle, although, of course, a commingled vehicle might also be interesting. So.
Alan Cross.
Chris, you've described a scenario where 21 funds and 2 pools have got to do something different. Is your expectation pools are going to move on block, or funds within a pool are going to move in different directions to any of the potentially 3 pools you've sort of identified are likely to be receiving people? So, because it strikes me, if a pool's moving on block, that's a darn sight simpler than different funds in the same pool wanting to go in different directions.
I think it's still a little bit uncertain. So the government's very clear that it's for each of those 21 funds to make their decision. When we've met with most of those funds, and on the whole, they're running a twin track approach, if you sort of mean. So there is some desire to preserve that partnership and kind of the effort that they've put in over many years. And so there is an option that they're looking at, which is how can they move en masse, as it were. And the way that's split, just for detail, there's 10 in one group and 11 in the other. But I think each of the funds, or certainly a number of the funds in each of those 2 groupings, are also working on a plan B, or I mean, I can't say which is plan A and which is plan B, but they're certainly working on 2 plans, so they can make sure they're making the best decision for their fund. I don't think we'll have clarity on that for a few weeks yet, but of course that's one of the big decisions: is does one move as an individual fund, or maybe as a small group of funds, or does one move as a pool as a whole? We're responding to questionnaires both from individual funds but also from pools, so it is a twin track approach that people are operating at the moment.
Thanks. That's helpful. It does strike me as there's some people stuck in the middle of that who are employed by these pools that are not going to exist, too. Presumably also got to be sorted out what their future is.
Thank you. Just on the independent governance review, I can't resist saying that we had one of those in 2020. And I remember my reaction at the time was, I could have told you what was wrong for now, but I was a relatively new councillor, so I wasn't asked. If we're happy with all of that, can we move on to the next item, which is the administration report, which is, I think, Philip Boyton.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. The administration report on this occasion is for the period 1st of January to the 31st of March. A break from the norm is that on this occasion, the report details 2 recommendations. Not only pleased to note all areas, but also a request from officers that you approve and agree to adopt statutory guidance pertaining to the McLeod remedy regarding a deadline for the implementation phase. So in regards to that, if I can move you on to page 142, special projects. The first special project is the McLeod remedy. So reiterating Joe's comments earlier around the amazing work that has been undertaken by the team in successfully ensuring by the 31st of August that all active contributor and deferred scheme member records have been updated. What that means is we are able to produce an annual benefit statement showing the value of those scheme member benefits as at the 31st of March for the actives and the 7th of April for the deferreds. We are currently in discussions with the pension software provider Hayward Pension Technologies around the configuration of those annual benefit statements. Those statements have to include, not only on this occasion, the value of annual pension, but also the value of the McLeod remedy underpin. Aside from the work I've just described, there is a retrospective piece as well, which means the administration team must review past cases. We have identified there are 650 scheme members that fall under this rectification. Not all may need a rectification. It may well be a smaller number, but that is a review that must be undertaken. And statutory guidance initially set out that that had to be undertaken by the 31st of August 2025. However, there has been recent statutory guidance which gives pension funds opportunity to extend that rectification deadline to the 31st of August 2026. Now, involved in the rectification exercise, there are essentially two groups of member. There are those retirements and deceased members processed from the 1st of October 2023, but also a group of members similarly that were prior to the 1st of October 2023. This involves those retirees, but also survivor pensions in payment, and also those whereby the administration team may have paid out a transfer to another LGPS pension fund or other entirely different pension arrangement. What is seen as good news, the number of rectification eligible scheme members that we've identified are on a similar level to other pension funds of a similar membership size, but also having recently liaised, Martin attended a recent pensions officer group meeting. We put ourselves in a very good position in comparison to our local neighbour pension funds who are not close to fulfilling their obligations to their active and deferred scheme members. So essentially, officers are seeking your approval, please, to extend our deadline to the 31st of August 2026 to ensure that the work is done still in good time, but also as efficiently and as accurately as the system will allow us to do at this time. Moving to the next special project, Pensions Dashboard Programme, picking up on the point that Councillor Cross kindly raised earlier in the meeting. There were no particular updates at this point. However, as the question has been asked, the pension fund again is in a very good position here, and a key cornerstone to delivering on Pensions Dashboards Programme is good quality data, which the pension fund has a trend of reporting back to committee on an annual basis. We have two types of data. We have common data, which all LGPS pension funds must ensure it holds in respect of its scheme members, this being surname, forename, date of birth, gender, and then scheme-specific data, which is the data that a pension scheme must collect in order to efficiently and accurately administer the benefits of its scheme members. For example, pensionable pay or guaranteed minimum pension, to name only two. And we've always topped out at plus 98% in those areas. Our chosen provider to support us in the delivery of the Pensions Dashboards Programme for Berkshire is Hayward Pension Technologies. This ensures that there is no externalisation of the data between software providers. So this ensures or supports business continuity and cyber security and data protection. We have already signed an arrangement with Hayward Pension Technologies. We have gone through the process of completing all of the necessary documentation. So we are in a pause period now, essentially. We have gotten in early in respect of this, so we are able to act as a test site. and that is ahead of the ultimate date for going live with the pensions dashboards of the 31st of October 2026. That is the date for all UK registered pension schemes and pension scheme administrators. There is an order in which different types of pension schemes need to onboard with the public sector. So not just the LGPS, but NHS pensions and civil service teachers' pensions being last in the queue and therefore no later than 31st of October 2026. Moving to the next project, Engage. So since the 31st of January 2013, the pension fund has operated a My Pension Online service, and this is giving access to our active contributors, our deferred members, and also our in-payment scheme members access to their access to an online account where they can view their own pension details, the details they see specific to their status in the scheme, but also allows them to view their annual benefit statement. So it's quick and easy access at a time that's convenient to them. Our software provider, Hayward Pension Technologies, is decommissioning My Pension Online as we know it at the moment on the 31st of January 2026. So we are working with them already to ensure that we can be upgraded to their new version of this service called Engage. We have an intention of going live on Engage week commencing 10th of November 2025. And in the lead up to that, we will have a period of rigorous testing to ensure the service remains accessible and all features and functionality that have been demonstrated to officers are available. We intend initially a soft launch, so only those scheme members that are currently registered for My Pension Online having access to Engage, but of course any scheme member of a status that is accessible can register at any point. And finally, the last project is a further consultation, this time access and fairness consultation. This was launched by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government on the 15th of May, and there is until the 7th of August for replies to be given to the consultation, a consultation that we intend responding to. 52 questions in total across a variety of different areas of administration. It's a much anticipated consultation, in fact, as there is a whole raft of sort of items on the wish list that the Local Government Association are holding that the pension funds have expressed. Perhaps regulations should be amended to reduce down the administrative burden and deal with some nuances. This also puts the LGPS up to date with many other public sector schemes that also have previously had changes already to their regulations. So streamlining public sector administration across the varying schemes. So I'm happy to take any questions on the project section, but also any other items in the report. Thank you.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Philip, for your report. I've got a few points, maybe 3 points in total. So a couple of really picky little details, I'm afraid. If I can refer you to page 138, there just seems to be a typo in the final column there in terms of March 2025. It says 0.978 when I think it should be 97.8. And across the three tables, I just noticed that there's a bit of a discrepancy. Sometimes you have one representing 100 and sometimes it's 100. I just thought you might just look at tidying that up if you don't mind. I know they're really picky, and apologies for being so picky. The main thing I wanted to mention was around the performance, and also I wanted to go on to the McLeod remedy. So I just wanted to say that with the overall performance in the KPIs, I know that there were some challenges about a year ago where there was some staffing issues and the KPIs weren't being regularly achieved. And we've discussed that in the past. It looks to me like you've really turned the corner on that. And I was just really pleased to see that. And I guess that's down to sort of hard work from management and the team to deliver. In which case, I just want to say thank you for that, because I know there was a plan as to how you were going to address that and move people through and develop them. But it seems to be working. So I don't suppose you want to say, no, it's not. But if it is that, then can I just say thank you? Because I think these are important. This is what the members see and this is their experience. So these are important metrics, because it's not just a chart, it's actually what people experience with members of the scheme. So hopefully that will continue as the team has developed. So I just wanted to record my thanks and the recognition of that. In terms of the McLeod remedy, this you mentioned yourself, and this is on page 142. You've mentioned, and you're indeed seeking dispensation to use this extra year that's been allowed. But I'm thinking, well, the original plan was for the 31st of August this year, and therefore you should have been aiming for that. And I'm wondering, did the plan go wrong, or what's changing that you feel you can't achieve that? Because it looks like you wouldn't be seeking this dispensation if there wasn't a reason that you don't think you're going to achieve that. And therefore, did it go wrong? Have the ground rules changed, or what's happened? Because just because something allowed you to extend it, can be good reason to extend it if it's going to reduce cost or whatever. But I'm just thinking, but we don't want to just extend it for the sake of, oh, we're allowed to be slower, therefore let's be slower for the sake of it. So I just wanted to know sort of why you need that rather than us just agreeing to it or whatever. Or is there actually, no, that's what the rules allow, can be extended by 1 year. But if you're quite clear that you might achieve it quicker, could we not look at reducing that extension, say, to just a 6-month extension rather than a year extension? It just seems, let's aim to be better than what the rules allow us to be, was my feeling. Thank you.
Councillor Newton, thank you for all of your points there. You're absolutely right. It is important that we don't rest on our laurels and get lazy because we see that there's an opportunity of 31st of August 2026. But work is ongoing. It's ongoing every day in the delivery of the McLeod remedy for cases we pick up now. This is purely, though, a retrospective piece. One of the reasons, essentially, for the introduction of the extension is because the system functionality doesn't exist for all of the types of cases that we need to review. Hayward Pension Technologies openly admit that the system isn't up to speed. There are, of course, ways around that in terms of manual calculations, which we will look to undertake, and it is those that will take longer. So in some respects, we're in the position we find ourselves because we're not having access to a system that we believed we would otherwise have been able to deliver on the McLeod remedy. So we're not going to push out and say, well, 31st of August, please. We'll continue to work, or aim to work well within that.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So I think from what you're saying to me there, then, is you're saying that you thought the original deadline would have been supported by better technology than you've got, and therefore that's a rational reason and a justifiable reason for extending. So that makes sense to me. Disappointing that you've been left in that position, because obviously it sounds like there's more work involved. But that to me sounds like a reasonable reason. Other people will obviously make their own minds up on that. But I think I can understand then on that basis why you're seeking that extension and why that could be justified. I just think, as I've said before, it's what we don't want to do is these are people. These are not just numbers. They're people being impacted, and we want to treat them the best we can, obviously. And I'm sure you agree with that. Thank you.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. And I think Councillor Newton's asked some of the questions that I had. But the report mentions that the back, obviously the McLeod remedy, that the extension was asked for, one of the reasons was resource constraints. So my question is, do we need more resources to meet even the extended deadline? Is that something we should be asking for now if that's needed? Because that's what I read in the report was one of the reasons for the request for the extended deadline. And then my other question is, how are risks of delay going to be mitigated? You know, have we got a risk register? How are we going to monitor those risks going forward to make sure we don't miss an extended date? And then you talk about providing quarterly and interim updates as well. So again, I suppose we don't know what we don't know, but it'd be good to work collectively on what those updates are, so that we can give oversight and accountability as we move forward on all of those points. So those are really my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Yes, we have presented and do have a risk register dedicated to the McLeod remedy. So we can bring that forward to the next meeting, providing an update on where we are at. Should the decision be to permit an extension. The issue isn't perhaps with Berkshire necessarily, but it's with the other LGPS pension funds being, as I've alluded to, further behind, we believe, to what we are. Scheme members will always be paid the value of benefits that we are able to pay them at that point in which they become due, and then re-reviewed to ensure that should they be subject to the McLeod remedy, then we will sort of uplift and pay those arrears due and any interest that may be due in line with the regulations around the McLeod remedy. If I as well, at this point, I can take the opportunity to respond to Councillor Newton's point. Although the system isn't currently able to deliver all areas of the McLeod remedy, the team itself that we have available to us is educated and given the tools for team members to be able to understand that the calculations that they are carrying out, that there is not a reliance on the system in accepting the answers in which it produces. There needs to be a sort of checks available to be made that what the system produces is in fact right. So hopefully I can take this opportunity to give you all comfort in that checks are carried out. Now those checks are carried out by a variety of different levels of knowledge and abilities and skill sets within the team. We're currently carrying one vacancy in the team. The reason for that comes back again to what Joe alluded to earlier around the number of trainees that we currently have within the team and the time it takes from the experienced team members to be able to train and bring those individuals up to speed without any detriment to the work that they need to carry out, or as little as possible. So we are going through a cycle at the moment where we need to bring those less experienced team members up to speed and have confidence in their abilities to be able to work independently. So we're acknowledging that we need to take the time to ensure that they are comfortable in the job that they're undertaking, and confidence to ask questions and challenge as well, where they believe perhaps something that we're doing now could be done a better way, having another pair of eyes looking at it. So that's where we are at the moment in the round, I suppose.
And the quarterly updates as well. The quarterly updates and the subject. The last question I had around the updates.
So yes, in regards to the dedicated risk register that we have for McLeod, we can bring that back to you at the next meeting. Hopefully by which time we would be able to demonstrate the progress that we've made, and perhaps even reducing down the level of risk that we currently have the McLeod remedy at on the overall risk register.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Tizzy.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. The second will be talking about the McLeod remedy. The first, can I just congratulate you? I think looking at the standard key performance indicators, there has been a consistency now in terms of meeting the KPIs that we've been setting. I think starters, certainly the whole year that is shown, we've met the KPI. I think for deceased was like the last 6 months, we've consistently met. Ditto, I think refunds, that's the whole year, and retirements about 9 months. I think so. It's really, really good that there's not just that we've been meeting them, but we've been consistently meeting them. And as Councillor Newton said, that is the experience that our pension members will have of the scheme, that they're getting the information that they need and getting, their experience of the scheme is a good one. So thank you. Can I just record that is really, really good to see. McLeod remedy. Starting off by just saying, I concur with what's been said before, that actually there seems to be a marked move forward, which is really, really good. It's lovely to see that we've now that the active and deferred members have all been updated, which is really, really good to see. To consider the underpin. And with respect to the ones that we still have to do, it looks like we've got to roughly quantify. We've quantified it about 650 members. So that's really good to see. With that all in mind, and I noticed, I think earlier when we were looking at the risk register, that was a notable thing, that actually the risk had been reduced, which clearly reflects the work that has been done. So again, I think that's very good. Now, I'll just sort of say on that basis, I'm minded towards saying, well, look, it sounds like you need possibly less than a year, but rather than coming back here in the next quarter and then the next quarter or anything like that, let's just give you that year and let's move on. Because it sounds like there's really moved forward a lot. It's great work. And so I'm so that remind me to say, oh, this is what we need. Absolutely. So that's my only point. I don't have anything else to say. Oh yes, there was actually, yes. I mean, did you have any comment on that? I had one further question, which is a small thing about it.
Just to say thank you for your kind words and acknowledging all of you that the hard work that's been undertaken by the admin team within what is a relatively short period of time. And that's testament to the oversight of Martin Griffiths, our pension administration manager, who's been with us for just over a year now. Joined us from another LGPS pension fund and had to get to grips with our position and ensuring that sort of all teams within the pension fund came together to deliver the one objective.
Thank you. And yes, indeed. Thank you, Martin, as well. Thank you. I've just got one question, which is about in 2.4 on page 143, about the last thing you mentioned, the access and fairness consultation. I know it's a sort of a consultation, but is this something that we are planning to submit something? And did we have any views if we had our wish list about what we would like to very, very broadly and at a very high level, do we have a view about what we would like to sort of submit to that review consultation?
So yes, it just in discussion over quite a number of years with other LGPS pension funds, but we've identified that there are some sort of barriers and hurdles, partly in some respects driven by the fact that different LGPS pension funds are interpreting regulations in different ways. So for example, in respect of 5-year refunds, the regulations currently state that where a scheme member ceases contributing to the scheme, and their entitlement is to a refund of their pension contributions, that must be paid within 5 years of leaving. Of course, pension funds rely on the response from the individual scheme member in order to pay that refund. But essentially, the scheme recognises it that if we go beyond the 5 years, then that refund, that benefit, if you like, no longer exists. There are some pension funds that ignore that and take the value of the refund in a transfer, whereas others will not. That in itself is a problem because of the number of that type of scheme member we have. You will see that earlier in the report, in that we have 1,000, well over 1,000 frozen refunds that we're struggling to disinvest. And that's one of the drivers behind that. So certainly, yes, we have our frustrations around some of the regulations, as do other funds that we speak to locally, as recently as last week. So we will be providing our response in consideration of discussions with other funds as well, to ensure as common a response as possible, but also picking out and giving direction on where our real issues are with the regulations, if you like.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on the McLeod remedy point and the extension. I guess intuitively, I'm sort of a little bit uncomfortable about the extension, in the sense that there's that kind of almost, rule of thumb that work expands to fill the time available. So you kind of, if we go with the extension, then it will sort of end up being, the full time. Could just for the benefit of possibly the people affected listening or watching any recording, it seems, could you just outline the likely impact? So obviously this is the point, this is the rectification exercise and is the review and recalculation of past process cases. Am I right in thinking that the review will either leave it the same or increase the previous settlement? So basically we've got people out there who are waiting for a benefit, potentially waiting for a cash settlement if there's a difference. And that they are potentially older people and therefore time may be of the essence. So I'm just looking for what to understand the implications for the people affected of the delay. That's one question. The second one is, what would it take to complete the exercise by the end of August? And if that was, pulling in a large number of temporary staff or whatever, we could look at the cost benefit, or is it a case of prioritisation? Because in some ways I'd be inclined to say, actually, could we have a push and finish it and get it done? Or would that then derail something else?
To completing the exercise, there are a number of categories of member we just can't do anything with, unfortunately, because the regulations do not allow us to run the calculations. And until they go through this next consultation, we're not legally able to make those payments to them. So people like pension debit members, the law does not currently state in the regulations who are actually able to make those payments. So even if we wanted to and we had the staff, we couldn't do them. As far as the other area of it, obviously we will put as much resource in as we can, but everybody is receiving some benefit, and it's only going to be an increase to what they are currently receiving. We're not really stopping anyone receiving any benefits at all.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis online.
Oh, thank you. I just basically wanted to know about the Hayward contract and how that ties in with the extension. I would presume that the Hayward contract would have to be extended in some way as well. I could be wrong there. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Yes, the current contractual arrangement with Hayward Pension Technologies is June 2026, due to expire. Now, when functionality will be put into the software, we don't have a hard and fast timeline for that at the moment. There are other software providers used by other LGPS pension funds. that we liaise with. One of those is sort of very close as we are to completing this exercise. So the functionality does exist within other software, but as Martin alludes to, regulations aren't all in place. So that's one reason why systems aren't able to operate the McLeod remedy fully. So all software providers in that respect are in the same position.
Okay, so through you, Chair. So what you're saying is that you're asking for an extension for the implementation, and the software provider will not be available during the full extension time.
Whether Hayward are available to us will depend on the outcome of a procurement exercise.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, just to chip in on that, we're not, to be very clear, we're not intending to terminate Hayward's for any reason other than, well, we're not intended, sorry, I'm saying this completely wrong. Our contract is a fixed contract with Hayward's Pension Technology that has a fixed end date, but we would be going out to a reprocurement exercise to recommission that. And whatever software provider we ended up through that reprocurement exercise would be required to provide us with a McLeod solution. So we're not, at the moment, we have a contract with Hayward's. When we carry out a reprocurement, whoever we relet that contract to will be able to provide us with a McLeod solution. So it's not, there isn't a correlation to an extent between the end of our current contract with Hayward's and our ability to fulfil the McLeod remedy. It's just that they kind of happen to be a little bit coterminous really at the moment. So it's not a condition of one that the other happens, and it's not a condition that one will fail if the other one ceases. It's purely an operational contractual management, but we will be able to deliver the McLeod remedy, whichever software provider we're with, if that makes sense.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the discussion around this, I'm a little bit confused maybe. If the committee decides not to agree the extension, is there a problem with that? Look, that then things won't happen, but can you make it work so you can work within that timescale? Or if, as I was suggesting, maybe others are suggesting, we don't give you the year, but we give you 6 more months, so we take it through to the 31st of March, would that then be more reasonable, but you could complete it? Or do you really need the year? I'm not quite understanding sort of what, because we've said that the people aren't getting the benefits they may be entitled to, that we know there's systems problems, but there's no date as to when that's going to get solved. So it seems like there needs to be another solution somehow. But I'm just unclear as to what the risks are if we just said, no, stick to the original date or just have 6 months.
I think the issue that we have is the original date is the 31st of August 25. We have been working to achieve as much as we possibly can by August 2025. The issue that we have is one of the final solutions, the final technology solution that we need to implement the final part of some of the members' remedies is not available to us from Hayward's Pension Technology. And that's common across the whole of the LGPS that's provided that uses Hayward's pension software. If you said you don't get the 31st, you don't get the year's deadline, we will be non-compliant with regulations because we cannot physically complete the solution because the solution isn't available to us to do that. If we are asking for the ability to extend up to 31st of August 26, we're not saying we're not doing any work until 30th of July 26. We will be working solidly throughout the period to get much of the solution completed as soon as practically possible within that 31st of August 26 deadline. We're not saying we're not doing anything until then. It gives us the ability to comply fully with legislation and regulations within a reasonable deadline. The intention would be as soon as that software solution is available, we implement it and we will issue those remedies as soon as we practically can.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. I think I'm still a bit confused because you're asking for a deadline to be moved, but there's no guarantee that the software solution will be available within that timescale. So therefore, you would be non-compliant even if we moved a deadline. So what I'm wondering is whether we should be conditioning this in terms of, yes, you can have the extension through till August 2026, but could we put a condition on that to say that also there's a secondary bit that says within 3 months of the software solution being delivered, you will complete it. So if they deliver the software solution on the 1st of January, you will then complete by the 31st of March, rather than it being that year. I just think it gives members a bit more comfort around that, we are, it's not us, not you in the fund that's delaying things. And as soon as you're able to do it, because if they don't deliver the software solution until another 3 or 4 years' time, you're still going to be non-compliant.
I think there are two. The provision of the software is one issue, but we can do, there is the practicality of doing manual calculations, but the issue then becomes those manual calculations may not be the final solution. So it's a question of, do we do the work and then do we have to do it again, and then do we have to do it again? We are working with Haywards, and Haywards are working with LGPS funds across the country to develop this, to finally implement this solution. I believe we're probably putting as much pressure on as everybody else on them to get that solution delivered. I think this is just a recognition of the fact that we are, and government have recognised through the ability to allow this discretion, that a lot of LGPS funds would fail to meet the deadline because of the availability of the technology solution. So we're not saying we don't want to do it. We're not saying we're not going to do it. We are trying to use all of the tools available to us to do it as appropriately as possible. It may be that some of the members that we've identified as being in scope, which is the 650 members that we've identified, when we do the final calculation, they have no impact on their benefit whatsoever. So it's not saying we've absolutely got 650 people that we may be not paying correctly. We have identified up to 650 people who may have an impact from this benefit. And in many circumstances, until they reach a certain date, we will never, until they actually retire or until they make a final decision, we may not actually know whether they have an impact until that date then. So we've put the processes in place, we're putting the controls in place, we're putting the education for our team members in place. We're just waiting for the final technology button that we can press that will almost give us a very quick answer. But we are working incredibly hard behind the scenes. We've invested in some new learning materials and development materials and resource materials for the team. We are, and the team are doing an incredible job. So we are doing our absolute utmost. We're not saying we don't want to do this until August 26. We're saying we want to do this as soon as the solution is available, but we do know that the solution isn't going to be available before August 25. So give us a year's deadline. We will not take a year. We will report back to you as quickly, but the 26 deadline gives us a bit more breathing space so we're not panicking and running the risk of being non-compliant.
I think time is moving on. Could I only ask for further contributions if you think it's something that hasn't already been said? We've got Councillor Wilson next.
Thank you, Chair. I guess just briefly, it's a development of this theme, but I just wonder if we can potentially agree this extension on the basis that it ensures compliance and that gives a frame, but then like internally, we maybe set targets to close it out quicker based on the actual moving factors that we don't know now. So kind of, and maybe actually as lead member for pensions, we can work on that and almost do it on an informal basis to go, well, what's a reasonable target with Ian as well, knowing that we're going to be compliant, so we deal with that today, but then we also go on what's a practical internal deadline to shoot for.
Councillor Tizzy, if it's brief, ideally,
Yes,
please.
thank you. Just, I think that's fair. I think we can't worry about what we can't control. And I just think that, given the work that's already happened, I think the worry that, oh no, if we give a year that, you know, everyone will go, oh no, and then just not do anything. I just don't, obviously that's a risk, but I just don't think that that's a particularly important risk at this stage. I think we're just, you're asking us, look, we need this just to be compliant, and and because there is uncertainty, I think we should just, as Councillor Wilson says, I would agree with that. Give this full extension, but then informally, obviously, let's do what we can to make sure we do it quicker.
Okay, so I take it we're happy to note this. Are we also happy to agree the extension, please? Good. Sorry. That brings us on to item 9. And I think we're going to start with some public questions. So thank you very much to our visitors for their patience, and also to a number of people here who've not yet spoken. So is it Rachel Luxton asking the first question? Oh, Sue, Sibani King.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. Joe, really appreciate you speaking to us at the beginning, and accept that we got the question in rather late due to holidays, etc. Obviously, we do feel that there is a lot of delay tactics at play, and that when we do get responses, they are inadequate as regards acknowledging your part in stopping a genocide. We are here, obviously, to try to speed that process up and make sure that we can stop the loss of life. I'd like to put on record that despite the International Court of Justice requiring all member states, and including organisations within those states, to refrain from supporting the rogue entity of Israel whilst they're committing genocide, you've still not made any decisions. You are aware that your investments in companies arming Israel is part of what is allowing these atrocities to continue. We have sent you information and links which amply spell this out, so you cannot pretend not to know. If all organisations and states were to withhold funding and divest, Israel could not continue with its murderous agenda to expand in the Middle East. Every little helps, including your investments. Every day that you delay, another child is orphaned, maimed, burned alive, killed in the most horrific ways, along with hundreds of other civilians. You have the opportunity to make your decision to now stop your part in this crime against humanity. It's clearly inevitable that sooner or later you will need to divest, as it will no longer be financially viable nor profitable to your scheme to invest in these companies, as Israel is rapidly being downgraded in financial markets and is already a pariah state. You cannot claim to have an ethical statement or policy and at the same time invest in companies that make weapons to kill people and support a racist regime that's been occupying and oppressing Indigenous people since 1948. We ask that you do the right thing and go down in history as one of the authorities with not just foresight, but humanity and compassion. And therefore my question is, and as you've been talking about some issues with software, may we know the timescale of when you're going to survey the staff who do not want to be complicit in war crimes and apartheid, so that people of conscience can choose to opt out of these immoral investments? Thank you.
And is there a second question from Rachel Luxton? And then they can be answered together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Rachel Luxton, Chair of East Berkshire PSC, and we're here again to remind you that Israel has been intensifying its genocide of the Palestinians in front of the world for over 20 months. Perhaps because the UK government is not currently abiding by international law, the members of this committee appear to be unconcerned about their potential complicity. However, there are a number of experienced lawyers in this country and across the world currently working together to ensure that organisations and individuals that have been complicit in Israel's ongoing genocide of the Palestinians will be brought to justice. There are also an increasing number of committed people across this county who are determined to hold public bodies and individuals such as yourselves to account. We understand that you're still investing in Israeli government bonds despite Israel's credit rating having been downgraded by Moody's and the state's total disregard for international law. So will you at least commit to divesting from these? And shouldn't your risk assessment include something about this? I just have a last point regarding the survey of scheme members. We'd be happy to work with you to draft a consultation document for your staff and to give you the benefit of our specific knowledge. Thanks.
Thank you. Joe Thistlewood, I know you have seen the questions slightly in advance. Do you have an initial response, please?
Initial response. Thank you very much for your questions. We do take your questions seriously. We are working through our responsible investment policy. We continue to work through our responsible investment policy, and we will take these matters into consideration when we do work through our responsible investment policy. Your questions were received by email, for which thank you very much for sending them through, but they were received quite late on Thursday night. I received them on Friday morning, asked questions to support a response, and have only just received that response, that information today. I propose writing to you with a response to your questions, and I will do that as soon as I practically can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we now have the responsible investment report from LPPI. Can I ask who's presenting that, please?
That will be me. So I'll keep this brief. The report presents a whole series of metrics aligned with the policy. And in terms of the overarching approach, the implementation that we take is aligned with essentially long-term stewardship of looking at financially material risk factors. So those are the areas of focus. The focus will be effective long-term stewards of your capital and reputation. There's a few key points. There's an awful lot of detail in the report. Very happy to answer questions. So I won't go through the details. I'm conscious we're running tight on time. There's one or two key points in here which I'll just pick out, just one or two. One is we've received confirmation that our submission to the UK Stewardship Code was accepted earlier this year. Noted slightly further back in the pack, it talks to the consultation on the UK Stewardship Code. That is now out, or it has now been published, the consultation. And as I say, the way I would frame that is the wording aligns more with what I said earlier in terms of creating a stewardship environment that's more focused on financially material factors and the alignment to the capital owner, if that makes sense. It's brought it in, made it slightly tighter. The previous wording was much broader, talking about broader societal aims and similar. And then the revised wording has made it more focused on the stewardship of the capital and then the long-term stewardship of that. And then thinking about financial materiality, but thinking about a broad range, stewardship defined broadly, but coming back to that financial outcomes type perspective. Other things we've got in here, as I said, there's a few other points in here, but I won't. The other point we've mentioned multiple times in previous meetings, we have launched a climate solutions vehicle, and that's something that we can talk to you about more in part two. And I won't comment further this, because it has a lot of detail, so very happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions? Councillor Tizzy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few things. The first thing is it's really good to see some of these what they call the real world outcomes, because it is nice to know that there is a positive impact that is happening. Certainly at the micro level, that does appear to be the case. On the other hand, when I look at the, and perhaps it's because it's a small graph, but on the main dashboard, so I'll find a main page number, it's on page 2 of the 26-page thing, and it is on page 150 of the main pack at the bottom there, the governance insights. When you look at the last 3 years, women on the board independent, support on safer pay, those lines look quite flat to me. They look quite flat. It looks, other things being equal at a macro level, you'd expect to see some sort of, and this is not just going to be about LPPI. This is going to be about, you know, the broader mark. But I'd like to think that we're having an impact, and I suppose maybe we are at a micro level, but maybe not at the industry as a hard isn't at a macro level. Just wondered if you had a view on that. Let's keep with that question first of all.
Yeah, as you say, I think, yeah, there's a whole series of factors at play here. The way I would frame certainly our involvement, we are a very active owner of every asset within the portfolio, not only listed equities. Although a lot of, as you correctly point out, a lot of the reporting does focus on listed equities because there's a lot more data available. So we're a very active and engaged owner. The focus is very much on long-term stewardship of our partner funds, capital and reputations, and we engage on key issues as is noted here. However, there isn't our ability, certainly in listed equities, on listed space, we can certainly vote and use our voice as an owner alongside other like-minded investors. But it's one voice of many, and I think these are large changes. I'd say that the long-term direction of travel has been positive over the longer term, but as you say, certainly the shorter-term movement has not been. I'm looking at this chart carefully. That it's quite small. Potentially, there is some change that's lost in the grading, but I'd say there is an awful lot of politicization as well in the last, let's say, 12 months of some of these factors. I won't comment too much on that, but I'm sure you can get what I'm driving at. So, and the US is very dominant in the universe of this portfolio. So I think I think last meeting we talked on, I think Athan talked quite in some detail about what's taking place in the US and seemed to run some comments. So I think if you've segregated Europe and the US, you may see some differences, but the aggregate, it's not moving particularly in one direction or the other as per this data.
Further question, if that's okay. Thank you. So the other thing is actually, if we just look on page 160, the engagement results by theme, and it's split out nicely into ESG, and a lot of this report is about the sort of mainly on the E side, you know, and the green agenda, the green initiatives. On the S bit, which we don't normally cover, but the one where the bar for having no success or negative success is the highest is about the human rights due diligence for CARAs, conflict areas and high risk areas. That's obviously the engagement with the companies that we are invested in, and then there's a question about, well, which companies should we be invested in? This sort of does, I suppose, given the comments that have been made just secondly by the two public the speakers. It's a difficult one. I remember us at a previous meeting talking about when the government, the UK government said you mustn't invest in Russia, and we just stopped. And I'm sort of half waiting for the current new UK government to say something one way or the other about Israel, Palestine and that situation there. And they sort of haven't. And I know that, as Joe has said, we are looking at our RI policy, and that is something that is happening now. So we are looking at that and looking at what we should be focusing on. But just as the UK government has it's interesting, I haven't heard from the Attorney General about the, what is the legal position here? And I suspect that there's this sort of conspiracy of silence between them where the UK Prime Minister must know what the legal position would be and isn't asking the Attorney General. The Attorney General isn't saying, or something like that. They're just, and so no one can be held to account. I know that the legal position looks like we are clear, looks like that there is a legal position that we are not doing anything for which we can be held liable. But I think that the moral position, I don't know. And I too would be keen to sort of see, well, look, is there a way? We'd obviously use the input and make sure it was in a fair way, but it'd be good to know what scheme members thought about this. They might not care. They might not care. But I suspect that increasingly, I think people are a bit tired of, I think they don't want to see their investments going somewhere where they shouldn't. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if that is something that is on our radar at the moment.
Can I please jump in at this?
Yes.
With the greatest respect for this conversation, I think it is a really important conversation, but we have said that the public question will be answered in response. We have discussed Israel and our response to that at the last Pension Fund Committee meeting. And we are preparing our responsible investment policy, and we are going to discuss it. The report, with the greatest respect, Councillor Teasey, the report that LPPI provided does not mention Israel. We were talking about the report that LPPI were presenting. We have already said that we will prepare a response to the public question. If we could draw this to a close, if that's all right, Chair, sorry for jumping in here, but we have other business to discuss in this meeting. We have already sort of touched on the Israel issue. We had a long discussion at the last meeting. We can't keep reiterating this. A lot of the discussions have already happened. So if we could draw this to a close with respect and carry on with the report on responsible investment, if that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Cross.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going off the PowerPoint presentation itself. I haven't got the long deck in front of me, so page 5 I'm on. So I just have a couple of questions, if I may. So I note on page 5 on the green activities, this has been decreased. So my question was really whether the current 4.41 green exposure ambitions is really enough, given your climate change commitments. I think you said, Richard, you were talking about climate change in part 2, but I didn't hear exactly what you said. So if this is a part 2, then I'll defer it. But if not, it would be great to get an answer.
So I was cautious about talking about specific funds and investments in the open part of the meeting. I'm going to look at my boss about in terms of the can we speak about specific funds at this point? Yeah, of course, it's fine. There's no reason not to.
It's an outcome rather than target.
Fine. Okay, so no, it's more. I'm just about the specific investments. So in terms of the portfolio, I would say that the level of green exposure that you want to have in the portfolio, that's something for you to think about. There's just something we can certainly move the portfolio around to target different levels of exposure to other those themes. Let's say that was the whole reason for developing the climate solutions vehicle. And to be able to allow clients, partner funds, that flexibility to be able to target different levels of exposure to these types of themes and assets. The level that you have currently, as you're not invested in the climate solutions vehicle or in that fund, is a result of what's in the portfolio, what I would say naturally, if that makes sense. So it's an outcome that's been delivered as a result of pooling vehicles, the portfolio we've created. So is that a good number? I'd say it's a meaningful number. It's hard to say what is, it's a calibration. That's a matter for where you want to take the portfolio, but it's a meaningful amount. And that, as you say, the data here presented shows you, gives you clarity on what level of exposure you have.
Okay, thank you. I have some additional questions. Is that okay? Can I carry on? Okay, thank you, Richard. So jumping on to page 19 of the pack, just a couple of questions there. So I see you've launched this new EOF, Environmental Opportunities Fund. So my question was on that one, how are you going to measure success on that fund? Because I couldn't see that in the pack. And then jumping over to the other side of that same slide, interestingly about the stewardship and engagement around SEC as well and the regulation updates. So my question was around will the SEC regulatory changes weaken the global asset management on ESG that Councillor Teasey has just touched upon? And if can you still, given all of the situation in the States, maintain influence if the US-based managers reduce their activity that you mentioned on that slide? So those are really the questions on that one page. Yeah.
So that is what I would say has a broader mandate than simply financial return and risk type components. So it's a broad mandate with additionality or intentionality to deliver specific, call them environmental outcomes. So it's a balanced mandate, and there's a very specific set of outcomes that it's targeting. There's a green governance framework that are measurable and are very clear and are specified up front alongside financial return components. So on everything else in the portfolio, it is what I would describe as an integrated ESG sustainable approach, which means you're taking these other factors into account, but you think about financial materiality, they're an outcome of a goal. In terms of the EOF fund, the additionality, the broader ESG factors are a target or a part of the mandate as opposed to an outcome.
Right, okay.
So in terms of the SEC question, I'm going to turn to Chris. Chris is, I'd say, has better knowledge than me on the specifics of that one.
To pick up a couple of things, just going back to a previous question, just for the committee's clarity, the changes you see on that chart are really about mark-to-market changes, the valuation changes. It's not the relative percentage that's in green investments, is because some of the renewable assets have performed less well than the portfolio has overall in recent quarters. We haven't been looking to reduce that, and I think that methodology of reporting is becoming a bit dated. As Richard's spoken to you about over the last year or so, we've been in the process of integrating effectively net zero plans across all of the different asset classes, and I think that's probably a more current metric, and so we're looking at some of the reporting to make it more useful. In terms of your direct question on interventions of the SEC and other changes to, I guess, political narrative, I think in the short term it's created some challenge to collective engagement, as it were. So for those not familiar, the fundamental question that's being asked here is it reasonable for groups of investors to have common interests and common views and work together to engage in that common pathway? Or is that acting more as a cabal and trying to direct and change management and be overly influential? I think there's different kind of legal and political views on that, and those views are different depending on which side of the Atlantic you are. At the moment, I don't think, if I speak to the team, that we feel it's having a materially negative impact on our ability to engage. It's created a bit of a hiatus, perhaps, but if you speak to the managers involved in the US, then they had to pause immediately to kind of work out what it all meant. But the latest conversations are they are intending to carry on engaging with companies and stewarding assets as we'd hope they would do.
Thank Chris and Richard. Yeah, because I was looking at the NZAM, the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative as well, because my question was if that global alliance, the NZAM dissolves, have you fallback measures? Is that all sorted out? Have you got that in plan and in train to jump on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, yes.
Okay.
So the NZAM piece, there is a plan in place for that to evolve anyway,
Right.
formally. I don't think it's in this document.
Yeah, no.
But we have a fallback plan in place. We'll continue
Okay.
to
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I won't take any more time.
in the short term it makes
Okay,
carry on
great.
as we work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Avin Devitt.
Sorry, didn't know what I was doing. I think I would concur with that, and just to give another perspective, it seems that many of these alliances were voluntary alliances. The efficacy of them was sometimes in question, as opposed to maybe some signaling or just performative actions. So I think this is a chance now for those who are truly committed to making change to focus on efficacy And that's more directed, more targeted. And I think we can see the evidence is in the actual efficacy of engagement, and it does force that examination across the board. But I would say, looking at where if this is commercially driven, I think this is an important cleansing of the of some of the movements and actually getting to what is truly going to work. So I would not be discouraged at all by some of this pushback.
If that's all the contributions, can we note this report? Thank you. Item 10, work plan.
Yes, first of all, I noticed when I was re-reviewing the pack today that I hadn't actually published the work plan for the pension fund committee meetings or the board, so I apologise for that. Everything that was on the work plan presented at the last meeting has been presented at this meeting, and everything that was planned for next meeting is still planned for next meeting, if you see what I mean. I'm really sorry about that, I was a bit frantic. We are looking at holding a third responsible investment task and finish group meeting because we've had two very, very good meetings, but we need to have a third one to actually bring it all together. And also looking to have an informal meeting to look at training and development on the valuation with Barnett Waddingham as fund actuaries giving us some training on what to expect and what the valuation assumptions, etc., for decision at the September committee meeting. So we need to try and do that, and conscious that August is August and nobody wants meetings in August, we'll try and fit that in sometime towards the end of July, but I will circulate round for details. It will be probably be a virtual session and we'll do it in a couple of hours, but hopefully we can get that done. So again, apologies for the work plan. I will share that around, but we're on track.
Alan Cross.
I was going to suggest, Chair, we look at it at the board.
Right. I think that brings us to the end of the public part of the agenda. So we now need to consider passing the following resolution, that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 72, the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting while discussion takes place on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1 to 7 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Thank you.